Hello and welcome to the micro tutorial for beginners. The idea of this video is that we are going to show every possible micro move in this game, pretty much. Like maybe not all, but at least the most important ones. And after watching this video, you will have an idea of how to micro every unit there is in the game. And I say we because I'm with a friend called Tatsu. Say hi to YouTube, Tatsu.
Hey. What's up, everyone?
We are going to show you this stuff, and Tatsu is going to be my micro opponent pretty much. And we start with a tag battle, and you can see there are some Auroras and some like strikers, UEF tanks. And basically Tatsu is just going to let his tanks idle for now, and I will use an attack move to his tanks. And that's how you're supposed to do it in an actual game, because like Kite micro consists of 2 steps. And the first step is basically the engagement move, where you like start attacking, and you do it by pressing Alt right click, and it places a ground attack order close to the enemy army. The tanks will fire at the maximum range, and then the UEF player is most likely going to react with his tanks and sending them back at our tanks. And this is when we use the Kite micro again, and we this time fall back. And that's pretty much how it works. So I'm starting now, and I'm attacking Tatsu's tanks, and Tatsu's tanks are just going to stand around idle and receiving some fire. But after a while, Tatsu is going to notice that tanks are shooting him, so about now, and he attacks us. And we realize that he's attacking, and we fall back. And you can see, even though Tatsu's tanks have a chance to fire back at ours, most of the time it's just our tanks shooting, whereas not all of Tatsu's tanks are shooting at the same time. And this is because our tanks have higher range, so even the ones in the back are able to shoot at Tatsu's tanks, whereas only the tanks in front of Tatsu's army can shoot at our tanks. And this is how you are supposed to use Kite micro. As you can see, we had even numbers of tanks, and the 15 Auroras have 11 survivors, but all 50 strikers died. So using T1 units that aren't Auroras is usually a very bad idea against Auroras. And the best way to counter Auroras is with gun upgrade T2, or the ACU itself, even if it's unupgraded, can work sometimes if the Aeon player is not microing very carefully. And T1 bombers work. So basically Auroras are designed to counter T1 units, and if you use the Kite micro like this, they're going to do their job fairly well. And anything but T1 land units are going to like kill your Auroras, but as long as you use them only against T1, you're in a very good situation. So let's move on to the next battle. This time I'm going to demonstrate a spread attack command, and this is a command you should bind in the option by pressing F1. And there's the command list, and somewhere in there is a command called spread attack, and for me it's on like Control Q and Control Shift Q. You could just bind it however you want it. And what it does is basically it makes the tanks move into the same location pretty much. And this like bundles them up so that they pretty much can like break their formation, be very close together, and also like attack from a very bunched up group. And if Tatsu attacks us now, then you're going to notice that since our tanks are much closer together, they are all shooting at the same time. But Tatsu's tanks are very spread out, so even if we aren't kiting, we have a huge advantage, since our tanks are firing at the same time and his tanks aren't firing at the same time. And spread attack micro can be used for several things, not only for tank battles like this. For example, if you want to navigate through choke points like this one, then you can use spread attack to prevent the tanks from getting stuck in the hills, for example. Spread attack has lots of applications. You can also, like for example, give commands to the base, attack commands, and press spread attack, and each unit will interpret the line of commands differently. And they will like basically divide the fire equally on each target. And this spread attack command is not perfect, but it gets the job done fairly well. So you should bind it in the options and use it as much as you can whenever it's applicable. The next thing we want to show you is basic dodge micro. And Tatsu is moving his no-thus. Please don't move the strat bomber, since that's going to kill the ACU. So send that one back, please. But the no-thus are fairly dodgeable. And the way you pull off dodge micro is simply by like queuing up movement commands or giving him in real time like I'm doing now. And you basically walk in a rough circle. And you can see Tatsu's bombers are targeted directly on the ACU. Please confirm that this is true, Tatsu, so we are cheating here. Okay, Tatsu, like you did target the ACU directly, right?
I did.
Okay, so like he attacked the ACU as you normally would. So no voodoo magic here, nothing. And you can see that like each bomb is missing the target. And they are just shooting around the ACU instead of on the ACU. And the reason is that the bomber calculates the path of the bomb on the basically assumption that the ACU is going to walk in a straight line. But since the layout of this straight line is changing every time I give a new movement command, the bomber won't know how to interpret the exact position of the ACU, and it will always miss by trying to predict the path of the ACU. And of course you can basically out-micro this kind of dodge micro. So if Tatsu switches his bombers to ground fire and places the command to where the ACU is circling, then the bombers will stop missing, right, and start hitting. So Tatsu, switch your...
yeah, I have.
Okay, that's great. And if you haven't, well, let's just see if you hit.
I could have aimed a bit better.
No, that was me. I forgot to micro while I was talking. But we just continue the same micro pattern. And you can see at the previous case where the bombers were targeted directly on the ACU, the bombs missed. But a circle pattern like this is fairly predictable. So any player who realizes the shape of this micro can basically just hit the point in between these small curves. And the area of effect damage will take care of the rest, and the bombs will actually hit. So when you use dodge micro like that, as soon as you notice that the enemy is switching into ground fire, you should change the pattern of your dodges. So, for example, you could use like a small, like 8-shaped dodge circle, like this. So you don't go in a small circle anymore, and you could still dodge, as you can see, but it is more difficult for the enemy to see through the dodge pattern. Having a dodge pattern, however, is fairly important, because as soon as you stop moving in such a straight line, yeah, that's fine, like this is the center of the dodge pattern, so it's natural the bombs would hit. But as soon as you stop moving in a dodge pattern, your ACU is going to get hit. So some sort of pattern is necessary. But you should try to like balance the efficiency of the pattern and making it as difficult to see through as possible. And that's not always easy. Dodging like this works in pretty much any situation. So not only in battles where you try to avoid bombs from a bomber. Tatsu, please take one of your pillars from your base and send it to the place where we had our first tank battle. And the reason I'm showing it with an Aurora is that the Aurora dodge micro is a bit different from like the other micro. Like you can see, the Aurora is rotating in a fairly weird pattern. And if I was actually, you know, like, okay, it's difficult, of course, especially since the projectile is traveling very fast. But I guess we can try again.
Yeah, I'd suggest trying not changing the direction too often, because I only hit you there because you were coming back to the place that he was originally shooting at.
Alright. I'll activate the gun on my Aurora. This way it won't change the orientation as hard. But the purpose of this demonstration is that the Aurora is pretty much yeah, odd in its dodging. Like, you have to kind of predict the time where the projectile will arrive, and then you need to do the dodge. And if you mess up, then the projectile will hit, right? So you can see it's fairly difficult. But since the Aurora is a hover tank, it has strange dodge behavior, and it doesn't interpret curves as clearly as such a pillar you can see here. So if Tatsu lets the pillar travel in curves, it's going to like turn pretty much in lifetime, whereas the Aurora first rotates around its own axis before doing that. So keep in mind that every unit that has hover ability is a bit more difficult to micro and dodge. But the most important learning is that you don't overdo your dodge command when you have a hover unit, because each hover unit interprets a dodge command more aggressively than other units. So using less dodge commands overall is going to be more effective than spamming dodge commands like crazy, because spamming them like crazy is just going to confuse the hover unit and it's not going to work out. The next thing we want to show you is a dodge and retreat pattern. And for this purpose, we are going to let this ACU get shot by the Exodus class destroyer. That's a situation you can encounter in some games. For example, you may have your ACU in your base, and the enemy won Navy, and it's starting to shoot at your ACU, and you realize that if you don't move, you're going to die. So you start falling back. Alright, ready when you are.
I am ready.
Okay, activate it then, please.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the idea here is that we want to combine our dodge pattern from before, which is like the small circle idea, with a general line that is like leading away from the destroyer, because we want to get some distance in between us to get out of range, right? And you can see it is fairly easy against an Aeon destroyer to dodge, because the projectile is incredibly slow, and it's also very well visible. But if it's a Cyber Destroyer, you can apply the same concept, and what you need to do is you just zigzag in small curves while still heading in a straight line away from the destroyer. And this also works for Cyber Cruisers, for example, or battleships. But again, if the line is too obvious, then a like very attentive enemy player is going to predict the dodge pattern, and yeah, he's basically just going to fire at the ground where your ACU is moving to, and then you still die, right? So be a bit careful about it. But small curves are the way to go whenever you dodge. The next thing we would like to show is going to be some hoverbombing, and for this purpose I'm going to take this Aeon strat and fly at Tatsu's base, and we are going to shoot at this T3 mass extractor. And the ability to hover bombers has been greatly reduced in the last patch, which is especially true for T1 bombers. But as you can see, strat bombers can still hover fairly well. And you hover by simply clicking under the bomber several times, and this is how you hold it steady. And that's pretty much all there is to it. If you want to turn around after you messed up, like I just did, you just give commands in a small curve. And I guess some patches change the sensitivity of the bomber, so it's pretty hard to like always get it right. But after doing it several times, you get the right idea, and you can like properly hoverbomb. And it's important that you wait for a long enough time to recharge the bomb before you place the next one, because otherwise the bomber is not going to be ready and just flying over the target without bombing. So the exact timing on the like recharge circle, you could say, reload circle, is something you will just like figure out over time. Also, like the angle from which you can hoverbomb. So this one was too close right now, as you can see, like it didn't drop. But I guess from here we could certainly fire at the PD on top of us, if I wouldn't always mess up the orientation of the bomber. But here we go, this should work. Yeah. and this next one as well. So apply everything you have learned in the tutorial on air build as to what to target with the strat, and try to maximize the effectivity of this whole concept by hoverbombing. And for the sake of completeness, I'm also showing you the T1 bomber macro. This has changed drastically with the last patch because hoverbomber was removed on the T1 bomber. Like, it's still possible to increase the rate of fire by flying small curves, but it's not the same as before, right? So you will try to keep the curves of the bomber as small as possible without accidentally like going past the target. And that's how you like basically get as close to the previous bomber micro as possible. Like, it has the same idea of hoverbombing, namely like increasing the amount of decreasing the amount of time the bomber needs to travel before it drops the next bomb. But since the last patch, you no longer hold the bomber steady in the air, but you fly small curves like this. And the better your curves are, the more easily it will be to drop the next bomb. But if your curves are going to be too large, or you like mess up the angle like I just did, then the bomber is not going to drop a bomb at all. And sometimes, like, if you have bad bomber macro, you should practice it in a sandbox until it's good. And otherwise, simply, you know, resort to the normal attack command, which is also fairly good. But you can still like increase the effectiveness of the bomber by hoverbombing or flying small curves like this. So I have to practice bomber macro myself after the last patch, and it's probably going to be difficult to like get it perfect, but working on it, I guess, and you should do the same. And then we are going to show you some dive micro, and for this purpose I have prepared some gunships, and Tatsu shield on the top is going to be the victim of this dive micro. And the way you do dive micro is basically you get close to the shield, you deactivate the fire on the gunships, and you let them land inside the shield. And after landing, you are going to switch on the fire again. And that's when the gunships shoot at the shield from inside the shield. So you may need more gunships to kill the shield in the first pass. And of course, if you have even more gunships, the dive micro is no longer useful. So you can sometimes simply shoot through the shield dome itself instead of diving. It's a cost-benefit calculation, and you need to get an idea of how many gunships you need to pull off effective dive micro. But this number cannot be so high that you unnecessarily waste time on diving, while you could just shoot through the shield dome itself. But I guess it certainly looks beautiful. That's like at least one reason you should always try it, right? Dive micro also applies to ships. And Tatsu has a shield boat on the right side. Please move the Atlantis away to the top. And I'm going to show you some dive macro with this destroyer. We are going to stay underwater until we are inside the shield dome. And as soon as we are inside the shield dome... Oh, it's actually much smaller than it looks here.
Yeah.
We are going to surface, and we are going to use the laser on the shield boat. And there we go. Like, the torpedoes already dealt most of the damage, but you must imagine that in a real battlefield situation, you have way more ships other than the shield boat shooting at your destroyer. And the destroyer won't necessarily prioritize the shield boat. So the reason we do this dive trick is that most UEF Navy is like surface fire based and not torpedo based. So you can basically avoid most of the fire from UEF ships until you are under their shield, and then you surface to basically kill the shield boat, and then you can like go underwater again and retreat out of the fire and kill the ships from a distance. So that's one of the ways you can do it. So dive micro doesn't only apply to gunships with shields, but also to ships. And since we are already talking about naval micro, I guess it's also a good idea to briefly look at ground fire. And this is going to be short and easy. I'm just placing a ground fire command on the water, and this is going to hit the Atlantis. Because like every other submarine, the Atlantis is vulnerable to area of effect damage that is directly on top of it. And you can see like it's taking fire from the ship, even though it's underwater. And this is how you can kill any kind of submarine. So submarines are only strong if you don't use this kind of ground fire micro. And the way you do it is, like, you simply place an attack command on the ground or use a hotkey, and then you drag this command by holding shift over the submarine. And on the next shot it's going to hit the submarine directly. And of course the submarine may start moving, so let's say it starts moving, then you'd simply correct the command after a while. So pay attention to the fire cycle of the battleship so you don't waste any time, because whenever you correct it, the fire cycle restarts. Ground fire is not only useful for Navy and for like hitting target that dodge, but also for PD. So you can see on the top corner of the map there's the Siren PD, and there is an Aeon PD next to it. And everything I'm saying about Siren PD is also true for Seraphim PD, because these two PDs don't have area of effect damage, but the UEF and the Aeon PD have area effect damage. And you can see this support is you build the PD in a way that it just doesn't reach the enemy PD. And for the Siren PD, which has the exact same range, this means the Siren PD will not have any chance at firing at our PD. But our PD can ground fire right in front of the Siren PD, and the Siren PD will take damage because of the area of effect damage, as you can see here. So it's out of range, but it still received damage. And that's why Aeon and UEF PD is going to be strictly better in a PD versus PD fight than their Siren and Seraphim counterpart. They basically get some ghost range thanks to this ground fire trick. The next thing I would like to show you is mobile missile launcher fire. And mobile missile launcher may seem like a straightforward unit you don't really have to micro, but that's actually not true. I guess the one where micro is not as important is the Siren one, but for the Aeon mobile missile launcher it's actually extremely important that you micro it. Because you want to pay attention to the fire cycle of the enemy TMD, and you want to adjust your fire to whatever the fire cycle of the enemy TMD is. So this volcano, for example, is going to stop all of our projectiles if we let our evensongs shoot at the same time. That's just the feature of this TMD. So you can see not a single one hit. So what we do instead is we pay attention to the fire cycle and we asynchronize the evensong shots. And unless we messed up, this should work. There you go. And this is how you kill it. So if you use, let's say, 50 evensongs in perfect synchronization, you're not going to be able to kill the volcano. But as soon as you start messing with the fire cycle and you let them idle for a while before shooting, then they are going to be able to take it out with a single projectile. And in this light, the evensong is not such a bad MML at all. And we are going to continue with a sapper over here. This is basically just like the opposite case, right? So for the sapper, you would want them to arrive at the same time, the projectiles. The Sapper can stop 1 or maybe 2, but not all missiles when they arrive in perfect synchronization. One actually missed, that's creative I guess, but on the second pass they should kill it. Must be due to the terrain I guess. And there we go. So whenever you're fighting against non-Aeon TMD, you should make sure that you hold fire and let the MML get in range, and then you activate the fire at the exact same time. And whenever you fight against Aeon TMD, you should asynchronize the shots as best as you can by trying to adjust the fire cycle. And this is how you're going to trick the Aeon TMD. And most people don't like the Evensong because it has high alpha damage, but it's incredibly easy to stop with TMD. But I guess the high alpha damage is actually a huge advantage, because with 4 Evensongs you can pretty much one-shot any T2 PD, and if the opponent isn't watching attentively, he may not even know where this came from and why his PD suddenly died. And if you know how to out-micro TMD, then you can mass Evensongs, and with some micro you can get through and kill the TMD in 1 or 2 projectiles depending on the faction. So not necessarily a bad MML at all if you know how to use it. The next thing I would like to show is the shield toggle. So ACU shield is fairly strong, right? That's pretty much common sense. But you can make it even stronger by deactivating it. And when you engage combat, then you can first allow your ACU to lose some HP. And after it lost some HP, you switch on the shield. And then it will stop losing HP, and both the shield and the HP can start regenerating. Also, veterancy is going to be more beneficial while your shield is switched off. And after receiving veterancy and depleting most of your HP, you can still switch the shield on.
Commander under attack.
Oh, what I just did is the automatic overcharge. That is something that has been added with one of the last patches. Normally you need to manually overcharge by taking this overcharge command and placing it on top of something. But now you can also right-click the overcharge icon and it will automatically overcharge. Keep in mind that whenever you lose your power storage or you upgrade your ACU, this function is going to be displayed as active, but it's actually inactive. So after every rebuilding of the power storage and after every ACU upgrade, you need to retoggle this function so that it properly works. And then you can use automatic OC again. It is great that Tatsu has such a nice base over here, because we can use it to demonstrate some Asylum micro as well. So the way you use Asylums is pretty straightforward, but I guess send some Gatling mods to our ACU.
Okay.
And I deactivate the fire of the ACU, so we're just
How
going
many?
to... you can send all, I guess, or maybe
Okay,
like...
that's 20.
Okay, that's a lot. Maybe send like 7 or 8.
Okay.
Commander under attack.
So the way you properly use Asylums is simply by spreading them out. And you basically wait until just before the first one depletes, and then you replace it with the next one. Because whenever the Asylums are overlapping, they will share some of the damage, simply because they are overlapping. So the idea is that you should properly deplete an Asylum entirely, like I just did now, and you should also move it away before it's destroyed. And that can be quite difficult sometimes, especially against like Gatling bots which have aerial effect damage. But in all other cases, especially T1 units, it frequently happens that they don't shoot at the asylum directly, but rather at the target that's protected by the asylum. And then you would simply like evade some of the projectiles with the asylum, fall back, and let it recharge behind the ACU. So you could see my demonstration here is fairly bad. Like, not a proper execution, since the Gatling bots are really pretty good at taking out asylums. But in any like battle against T1 units, you can use this trick. You simply shield your ACU, and when the asylum is depleted, you move it back and replace it with the next one. And while one shield is refilling, the other one is shielding your ACU, so that there is no time where no shield is refilling and no time where your ACU is unshielded. That's pretty much the optimal case. And you cannot achieve this by simply keeping all asylums overlapping each other next to your ACU. For example, a single overcharge is going to take out the domes on all asylums at the same time, and the next ACU shot of the enemy commander can kill the asylums. So make sure not to use them together like that. Okay, the next thing we are going to show is the air superiority bomber. And well, I guess that's a bit of a funny nickname for like trying to catch bombers mid-air, and especially the bombs mid-air. So Tatsu has a Cybran Strat bomber over there, and he's targeting the T3 factory that is on the anchor. And the ASFs are on no fire for now, simply for demonstration purposes. Usually you do this with way more ASFs and with way more strats. And what I'm trying to do is I fly under the strat, so that by the time the strat drops its bomb... Is it even activated? Yeah, it is. Okay. Yeah, and you can see, like, the ASFs caught the bomb in mid-air. And let's see, depending on the situation, like, it could be a very wounded teammate, an ACU on very low HP, and catching this bomb may be life-saving. So keep in mind that this is always an option. Trying to, like, fly under bombers with any kind of air unit to catch the bomb in mid-air. And sometimes the bombers will even damage themselves in the process. Of course, shooting the bomber is like your first priority, but whenever that's not possible, this trick is working out. Especially when it's like, let's say 50 strats or something crazy like that. Then the strats can kill themselves in mid-air using this trick. And I guess for the sake of completeness of this tutorial, we are going to cover ASF micro shortly. And I'm going to spawn some ASFs for Tatsu, and some ASFs for myself. And we are trying to have a micro battle. My ASF micro is probably not the best, and like Tatsu's ASF micro is probably not the best either. But we are at least capable of showing the general idea, I suppose. Okay, so we each have 50 ASFs. And the first step in an ASF micro battle is keeping the ASFs as condensed as possible. And right now they are quite close together, so I guess we are good to go. But in other cases you would fly small curves like this and bunch them up a little bit. And then you basically engage, so let me know. I hope you're ready, Tatsu. Okay, so let's start fighting. And you simply like choose a certain like pattern, and you fly a small curve that allows you to get like past the enemy ASFs. And the idea is that your ASFs are supposed to be shooting at all times, whereas the enemy ASFs are supposed to be shooting as little as possible. And the one who's flying the smaller curves will win, because that player's ASFs will simply get more shots out. And apparently Tatsu did better.
No way.
Yep.
They split up at the beginning.
Maybe so. I guess ASF micro can be a mystery sometimes. But in real games, using ASF micro against a player who doesn't micro at all usually gives you a huge advantage. So I guess let's try again. So let's go. Maybe let's fight around the water.
Up.
Yeah, okay, sure. Maybe let's fight around the water, since there are no hills and stuff obstructing the ASF movement. Let's try to get like near perfect conditions. even
Alright.
though this never happens in an actual game.
I split up again. Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Okay, so this time there are 30 ASFs remaining for me, and in the previous battle it was probably around 20 for Tatsu or something like that, right? So you could see that in a 50 versus 50 ASF battle, you would rather expect that like the winning player, if there is a winner at all, would come out alive with, let's say, 3 or 4 ASFs. But this is not the case at all. Like, if you're like having, like, if you train your ASF micro a lot, and you're having like pretty much like a successful attempt at it, then you can like take out many ASFs live and get a huge advantage from micro alone. So even if you have a great macro, like a very nice air build, if your micro sucks, then you're probably going to end up like wasting lots of ASFs on a much smaller number. So ASF micro is important. So I hope this tutorial helped, and we showed you the most important micro features of this game. Basically everything I said about Kite micro, the stuff at the beginning with the Auroras, can be applied to long-range units. Whenever a unit has higher range than another unit, you want to stay at maximum range instead of engaging in close combat. The only exception I can think of is the Exodus class destroyer, because that unit is also pretty tanky and it has very nice torpedoes. Or like rather charges they're called. But other than that, using all units at maximum range, if the range is higher than the enemy unit's range, is the best way to go. And the player who has the lower range units obviously engages and tries to like nullify this advantage by attacking as best as he can. You saw some other tricks, such as the dive micro at several applications of ground fire. You saw mobile missile launcher synchronization, and several examples of air micro and shield related micro. And of course dodge micro, which is extremely important to survive air. And every good player is expected to know dodge micro and pull it off at regular games. So some units such as T2 Seraphim bombers, T2 UEF bombers, and T3 Aeon strats, for example, are never supposed to work as a snipe weapon unless they're ground fired. And since ground fire is relatively uncommon for whatever reason, players who know dodge micro can pretty much survive any number of these bombers, even if they don't have any anti-air and they are still building the anti-air. So you're expected to know the dodge micro and apply it in actual games. So we really hope this helped you, and if you have any questions, please let us know in the comments. Thank you.